Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly paused to reflect on your desires? I'm not talking about fleeting wants, like that extra slice of cake or an impulse purchase online. I mean the deep, natural urges. Those that are part of who we are, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as sex. Today, in a world that constantly bombards us with images, messages, and expectations about what we should want, it's easy to lose track of what is actually natural. That's where Stoicism steps in to offer us a way to cut through the noise, to help us not only understand, but also manage our natural desires wisely. Now, I know this can be a tough subject to approach. Sex is often either overly glorified or hidden away, making it hard to know what role it should truly play in our lives. But we need to face this head-on, because it's a core part of our human experience, and Stoic philosophy gives us the tools to do that. Stoicism, at its heart, is about living in alignment with nature. The Stoics, great philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, recognized that we are all driven by natural desires. These include basic needs: food, shelter, safety, and of course, sex. This is where it gets interesting. The Stoics did not tell us to ignore these desires. They didn't say, pretend you don't want anything. Instead, they emphasized understanding these desires and controlling them with reason. When we talk about sex today, we're often flooded with two extremes. On one side, we see a culture that pushes indulgence, sexual freedom, instant gratification, the idea that you should pursue pleasure whenever and however you can. On the other side, there's a more traditional view that treats sex as something almost taboo, something to be restrained or avoided. Many men and women today find themselves swinging between these two, unsure where they stand. But what Stoicism teaches us is that neither extreme leads to a fulfilling life. Sex is a natural desire, rooted in our biology. It is, after all, a key part of human survival and continuity. But here's where Stoicism offers a profound insight. Just because something is natural doesn't mean we should let it control us. We shouldn't feel shame about our desires, but we also shouldn't become slaves to them. Instead, we need to strike a balance. Let's take a closer look at how this applies today. Think about modern relationships, the expectations placed on men and women. We live in a time where dating apps, social media, and entertainment have reshaped the way we perceive sex. The pressure to be constantly available, attractive, or to conform to certain standards is immense. Men are told they need to pursue sexual conquests to be validated. Women are often pushed into equally challenging roles, expected to manage societal pressures about sexuality, body image, and relationships. But where does that leave us? We see individuals chasing these ideals, only to feel emptier in the end. Why? Because when sex or any natural desire becomes the goal rather than part of a balanced life, it distorts who we are. And this is exactly what the Stoics warn us about. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote, "Let not your mind run on what you lack as much as on what you have already." This isn't just about material possessions, but also about inner peace. In today's world, understanding this balance is crucial. How often do we see people trapped in cycles of indulgence, moving from one partner or experience to the next, in search of something that never truly satisfies? Stoicism reminds us that no matter how natural our desires are, it is our mind that must remain in control. The pursuit of sex, when unchecked, can lead us away from reason into a state of impulsiveness, which weakens our ability to lead virtuous lives. So what can we do? The Stoics would say that we need to practice self-awareness and self-control. This doesn't mean denying our desires, but understanding them, seeing them for what they are. Natural, yes, but not the essence of who we are. For both men and women, this means stepping away from the noise of society that tells us what we should want, and instead focusing on what truly aligns with our principles. Today, many are searching for meaning in their relationships and their sexual lives. But as the Stoics taught us, true fulfillment doesn't come from external sources. It comes from within, from living a life of virtue, guided by wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These are the values that should guide how we approach our desires. When we understand that sex is just one part of a balanced, virtuous life, we free ourselves from the chains of excess. We learn to engage with it in a way that honors our humanity, but also respects our reason. Stoicism gives us the space to approach sex not with guilt or obsession, but with wisdom. It allows us to live in harmony with our desires rather than being controlled by them. In today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world, it's easy to let natural desires, especially sex, dictate our actions. But by embracing the teachings of Stoicism, we can rise above the chaos, allowing reason to guide us. We can acknowledge our desires without becoming their slaves. We can live a life where our natural impulses are understood, moderated, and placed in their proper context. So as you leave today and reflect on your own life, ask yourself, are you living in alignment with your natural desires, or are you letting them control you? Remember, Stoicism doesn't demand we reject what is natural. It asks us to engage with it wisely. And in doing so, we find not only peace within ourselves, but also the strength to live a truly fulfilling life. Now that we've explored how Stoicism helps us understand and manage our natural desires, especially something as intrinsic as sex, let's take a step further. What happens when we fail to moderate these desires? What happens when they start to control us instead of the other way around? This is where Stoicism introduces an important warning: the danger of excess. You see, while natural desires like sex are not inherently harmful, it is the overindulgence in these desires that leads us down a path of irrationality, and ultimately, away from the life of virtue and reason we are meant to pursue. In a world that often glorifies indulgence and excess, Stoicism offers us a stark and necessary reminder. When our desires go unchecked, they blind us to what truly matters. So let's dive into how Stoicism views excess and why controlling it is essential if we are to live rational, fulfilling lives. In Stoicism, excess is the enemy of reason. The Stoics taught that when we give in to excessive desires, whether it's for food, wealth, power, or sex, we lose the very thing that sets us apart as rational beings: our self-control. Epictetus famously said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." But here's the catch: when we indulge excessively in any desire, we hand over our control to that desire. We become enslaved by it. Let's take a closer look at what this means today. If you think about modern society, we are constantly encouraged to want more. More pleasure, more experiences, more everything. And when it comes to sex, that message is even louder. Men and women alike are bombarded with the idea that more sexual encounters, more attention, more gratification are signs of success or happiness. The problem is, this pursuit often leaves us feeling more empty, more restless, and less in control. This is where the Stoics were ahead of their time. They recognized that overindulgence in any pleasure, especially one as powerful as sexual desire, leads to irrational behavior. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone act out of impulse, only to regret their actions later? How often have people sacrificed their values, their peace of mind, or even their relationships, in the name of indulging a desire? These are the consequences of excess. When we allow our desires to consume us, we lose sight of our higher purpose. In today's context, it's easy to see how this plays out. We live in an age of instant gratification. Dating apps, social media, and entertainment platforms make it easier than ever to indulge in momentary pleasures. But just because something is easy doesn't mean it's good for us. The Stoics warned us about this. Too much pleasure weakens our self-control, and in turn, makes us less rational. Look around and you'll see this in action. Whether it's people constantly chasing validation through relationships, or losing themselves in physical pleasures at the cost of their emotional and mental well-being, excess has become a societal norm. We often see individuals sacrificing their long-term happiness for short-term gratification, and Stoicism warns us that this path is fraught with danger. The more we indulge, the more we lose our sense of self and purpose. In Stoic thought, indulging in excess doesn't just affect our personal lives. It affects society as a whole. A society where individuals are ruled by their passions rather than reason is a society on unstable ground. The Stoics believe that true freedom comes from self-discipline, and that discipline is the cornerstone of a virtuous life. When we give in to excess, we lose the freedom to make rational decisions, and this can have far-reaching consequences, not just for us, but for those around us. But here's the thing. Stoicism doesn't advocate for suppression of desire. It advocates for moderation. The goal is not to deny ourselves the pleasures of life, but to engage with them in a way that enhances our well-being, rather than detracts from it. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of having what you do not have, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave for them if they were not yours." In other words, cherish what you have, but don't let the pursuit of more control you. Today, as men and women navigate the complexities of relationships, career pressures, and personal fulfillment, Stoicism offers a valuable lesson. It is the unchecked pursuit of pleasure that leads to unhappiness, not the absence of pleasure itself. When we overindulge in any desire, we let that desire steer our decisions, and soon enough, we find ourselves off course. We become irrational, impulsive, and less in control of our own lives. So, how do we avoid the trap of excess? The Stoics remind us of the power of mindfulness and self-discipline. Before acting on a desire, especially one as strong as sexual desire, we must ask ourselves, is this serving my higher purpose? Is this bringing me closer to a life of virtue, or is it pulling me away from it? These simple questions can act as powerful guards against the irrationality that comes with excess. So, the Stoics recognize something profound. The path to wisdom and peace lies not in denying our desires, but in mastering them. When we allow our desires to overtake us, when we indulge in excess, we lose the very thing that gives our lives meaning, our rational mind. And without that, we cannot live virtuous lives. Excess, particularly in something as powerful as sexual desire, pulls us away from the virtues of wisdom, courage, and self-control. But by practicing moderation and mindfulness, we can reclaim control of our desires. And in doing so, we can live in harmony with our true nature. As you reflect on your own life and the desires that drive you, ask yourself, are you in control of your desires, or are they in control of you? Remember, Stoicism teaches us that the key to true freedom and fulfillment lies not in how much we indulge, but in how wisely we navigate the natural desires that are part of being human. As we continue our exploration of Stoic philosophy, we've seen how Stoicism helps us understand and moderate our natural desires, and how overindulgence can lead to irrationality and ultimately unhappiness. But the question remains, how do we find that balance? How do we live in harmony with our desires without letting them rule us? Today, I want to talk about a core Stoic value that ties all of this together: self-control. The Stoics believe that self-control is the key to maintaining balance in our lives. It's not about denying ourselves the pleasures of life, but engaging with them wisely, ensuring that we stay true to our principles. In a world that constantly tempts us to chase after more success, more pleasure, more gratification, self-control becomes not just a virtue but a necessity. So let's dive into how Stoicism teaches us to practice self-control and why it's the foundation of a balanced, fulfilling life. Stoicism is built on 4 key virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Temperance, or self-control, is the one that governs how we interact with our desires. The Stoics believe that without self-control, the other virtues are difficult to maintain. Without it, wisdom turns into indulgence, courage becomes recklessness, and justice fades into selfishness. So, what does self-control really mean in the context of our desires? It doesn't mean abstaining from life's pleasures entirely. The Stoics weren't ascetics who believed that the body should be punished or denied. Instead, self-control is about moderation. It's about knowing when to engage with our desires, including sexual ones, in a way that aligns with reason and virtue, rather than being swept away by them. Let's take a look at today's society. In many ways, we live in a culture of excess, where restraint is often seen as unnecessary or even undesirable. Men and women alike are encouraged to chase every desire, to push the limits of gratification. But here's the problem. When we lack self-control, we lose the ability to think clearly and act wisely. We become reactive rather than proactive, chasing after fleeting pleasures instead of focusing on our higher goals. Think about how often people today struggle with balance. In the age of social media, where everyone's lives are on display, the pressure to keep up can be overwhelming. Whether it's relationships, physical appearance, or status, the desire for more can easily spiral into excess. Without self-control, people find themselves drifting further from the life they truly want to live. And this is where Stoicism can offer a guiding light. The Stoics understood that to live a fulfilling life, we must learn to control our desires, not be controlled by them. When we exercise self-control, we free ourselves from the constant pull of external temptations and can focus on what truly matters. This is especially important when it comes to natural desires like sex. Sexual desire, when balanced by self-control, can be a healthy and enriching part of life. But when it's unchecked, it leads to impulsiveness and distraction, pulling us away from our higher purpose. In modern relationships, we often see the consequences of a lack of self-control. Whether it's the constant search for validation or the inability to commit to long-term, meaningful connections, the absence of self-discipline is a root cause. People get caught up in momentary passions, only to find themselves unfulfilled later. The Stoics would argue that without self-control, we become slaves to our impulses, constantly chasing desires that never truly satisfy us. But the beauty of Stoicism is that it offers a way out. It teaches us that self-control isn't a burden, it's a path to freedom. By practicing self-control, we create a space between stimulus and response. In that space, we can choose how to act. Instead of reacting impulsively, we can make thoughtful, deliberate decisions that align with our values and long-term goals. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This quote perfectly captures the essence of self-control. We may not be able to control the world around us, the temptations, the pressures, the desires, but we can control how we respond to them. And in that response lies our true strength. In today's fast-paced world, where distractions are constant, practicing self-control might seem difficult. But it's in these moments that Stoic philosophy becomes most powerful. By learning to control our desires, we take control of our lives. We stop being driven by impulses and instead live with intention. This is where true balance comes from, living in harmony with our desires rather than being ruled by them. For both men and women, self-control is the key to navigating relationships, career goals, and personal fulfillment. It allows us to engage with the world around us without losing sight of who we are and what we stand for. And when we master self-control, we achieve the Stoic ideal of inner peace. We're no longer thrown off course by every desire or distraction, but remain grounded in our principles. In conclusion, Stoicism teaches us that self-control is not about denying our desires, but about managing them with wisdom and balance. It's about understanding that while desires like sex are natural, they should never be allowed to dictate our actions or control our minds. Self-control gives us the freedom to choose how we engage with our desires, ensuring that we remain true to our values and live a life of purpose. As you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, are you in control of your desires, or are they controlling you? Remember, Stoicism offers us a simple but powerful truth. The key to a balanced, Fulfilling life lies in mastering ourselves. When we practice self-control, we reclaim our power, live with intention, and find the peace that comes from living in harmony with both our desires and our reason. As we bring this series of discussions to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on the profound insights we've explored through the lens of Stoic philosophy regarding our natural desires and the path toward self-control. We've examined three critical aspects: understanding our natural desires, recognizing the pitfalls of excess, and practicing the self-control necessary to maintain balance in our lives. First, we acknowledged that natural desires, such as sexual urges, are a fundamental part of the human experience. Stoicism teaches us that these desires are not to be feared or shamed, but understood and accepted. In today's society, where we often find ourselves bombarded with conflicting messages about sexuality, relationships, and pleasure, it's vital to recognize that these desires are rooted in our biology and are therefore natural. However, the Stoics remind us that understanding these desires is just the beginning. It's essential to approach them with wisdom, ensuring that they don't dictate our actions, but rather inform our choices. Next, we delved into the dangers of excess. In a world that often glorifies indulgence and instant gratification, it's easy to get swept away by our desires. The Stoics warned us that overindulgence leads to irrationality, clouding our judgment and steering us away from a life of virtue. When we allow ourselves to be consumed by our desires, we risk becoming slaves to them, losing control over our minds and actions. This is especially evident in the realm of sexuality, where the pressures of modern life can lead to impulsive decisions that we may later regret. By recognizing the path of excess, we empower ourselves to make more conscious, deliberate choices that align with our true values. Finally, we discussed the crucial role of self-control and balance in our lives. Stoicism teaches us that self-control is not about denial. It's about moderation and intentional engagement with our desires. It's about understanding that while it's natural to experience desire, we must not allow those desires to rule us. The practice of self-control enables us to create a space between our impulses and our actions, allowing us to choose wisely and live according to our principles. In a society where distractions are plentiful and the allure of excess is strong, cultivating self-control becomes essential for maintaining our inner peace and living a fulfilling life. As we reflect on these key teachings, I urge you to carry them forward into your daily lives. Think about how you engage with your desires, particularly in relationships and personal fulfillment. Consider how you can practice moderation and mindfulness, ensuring that your actions align with your core values. Remember that Stoicism offers us the tools to navigate the complexities of modern life, allowing us to live with intention and purpose. In closing, let's embrace the Stoic philosophy as a guiding light in our journey through life. By understanding our natural desires, recognizing the dangers of excess, and practicing self-control, we can cultivate a life of balance, virtue, and inner peace. As you move forward, remember the wisdom of the Stoics. True freedom comes not from the pursuit of external pleasures, but from mastering ourselves and living in harmony with our desires and our reason. Thank you for being a part of this enlightening discussion. May you find strength and wisdom in your own journey toward a more balanced and virtuous life.